You said no. A simple, honest no. And then you spent the next 20 minutes explaining why. You rewrote a text message 3 times. You rehearsed your reason in the shower.
No.
You added sorry twice, just to make sure they wouldn't think you were being difficult. But here's what's strange. Nobody asked you to explain. You just couldn't stop yourself. That urge, that automatic need to justify every decision, every feeling, every boundary, it's not politeness. It's not kindness. It's a survival pattern your brain learned a long time ago, and it's quietly controlling your life. There's a reason this feels so automatic. Your brain didn't learn to over-explain by accident. It learned because at some point in your past, your feelings weren't accepted at face value. Maybe you grew up in a home where no wasn't a complete sentence, where saying I don't want to was met with anger, guilt, or silence. So your brain adapted. It built a defense mechanism. If you could just explain well enough, thoroughly enough, convincingly enough, maybe they wouldn't get upset. Maybe they would still love you. Psychologist Dr. Lindsay Gibson calls this pattern a hallmark of growing up with emotionally immature parents. In her research, she found that children raised in environments where their emotions were dismissed or punished learned to over-justify themselves as a way to stay safe. The explanation becomes armor. You weren't born needing to prove your every decision. You were trained to believe that your choices weren't valid without a good enough reason, and that training didn't disappear when you grew up. It followed you into your friendships, your workplace, your relationships, everywhere. Does that sound familiar? There's actually a name for what's happening inside your brain when you over-explain. Psychologists call it the need for external validation. Your sense of whether you made the right choice doesn't come from within. It comes from how the other person reacts. If they seem okay, you feel okay. If they seem even slightly uncomfortable, your brain goes into panic mode. You start adding more words, more context, more reasons. Anything to smooth over the tension that might not even exist. Dr. Harriet Breaker, in her book The Disease to Please, identified this as one of the core patterns of people-pleasing. She found that chronic over-explainers often carry an unconscious belief that they are only as acceptable as their last justification. Every unexplained decision feels like a risk. Every silence feels like rejection. But here's the part no one tells you. The more you explain, the less people trust your words. Think about that for a moment. When someone gives you a short, clear answer, no, I can't make it, you accept it. But when someone gives you a 5-paragraph essay about why they can't come, something in you starts to wonder if they're hiding something. Over-explaining doesn't build trust. It erodes it. Here's where it gets counterintuitive. You over-explain because you want people to understand you, but over-explaining actually makes people understand you less. When you flood someone with reasons, you're not communicating. You're performing. You're not sharing your truth. You're managing their reaction. People can feel that. They might not be able to name it, but they sense when someone is speaking to be understood versus speaking to avoid disapproval. There's a deeper cost, too. Every time you over-explain a boundary, you weaken it. You're essentially telling the other person, and yourself, that your boundary needs permission to exist. That it isn't valid on its own. It requires proof. And the moment you offer proof, you've also offered something else. A place to argue. If your reason for saying no is that you're tired, someone can say, but it'll only be an hour. If your reason is simply no, there's nowhere to push. Have you ever noticed that? The strongest boundaries have the fewest words. And the most self-assured people you know, they rarely explain themselves. Not because they don't care, but because they trust their own decisions enough to let them stand alone. So how do you actually stop? Not overnight, not perfectly, but gradually, with small shifts that rewire the pattern. The first step is to notice the urge without acting on it. The next time you say no to something and feel that pull to add a reason, pause. Just for 3 seconds. Let the silence sit. Your brain will scream at you. It will tell you that the other person is confused, offended, pulling away. That's not reality. That's your old programming. The second step is to practice what therapists call the one-sentence boundary. You say what you need in one clear sentence. Then you stop. I can't make it tonight. That's it. No because. No apology tour. No 3-text follow-up. One sentence. Can you do that just once this week? The third step is to start tracking when you over-explain, not to judge yourself, but to get curious. After a conversation, ask yourself, did I explain because they needed the information or because I needed them to be okay with my decision? That question alone will change how you communicate. The fourth step might be the hardest. You have to let people have their reactions. Someone might be disappointed. Someone might not understand. That's allowed. Their reaction is not your responsibility to manage. You've spent years trying to control how people feel about your choices. That was never your job. It was never even possible. And the freedom you've been looking for? It doesn't come from finding the perfect explanation. It comes from realizing you never needed one.